But first, the exclusive interview with Union HRD Minister Prakash Javadekar. The government is taking steps to stop the process of brain drain. Listen in to what the minister had to say on that issue.
Mr. Javadekar, 80s and 90s were 2 decades when brain drain, a word came into our vocabulary. And you look at Google, Facebook, all the startups in the West Coast, you have Indians all over the place.
Yeah.
And then you spoke about brain gain. Nice word, nice acronym. But how do you reverse that?
It's
you
not
don't
a
have
problem.
startup culture
Yeah,
in India?
we have. We have started, and this is vision of Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji. Let me be very clear about this. In last 3 years, many things have changed. And in particularly, you can go to IITs, IIMs, ISAs, and everywhere you will find that scene changing and new bubbles of enthusiasm. What we are doing with Higher Education Finance Agency, the budgetary support will be 2,000 crore, but with that we are leveraging 18,000 crores from market, making it 20,000 crore, $3 billion in 3 years to be pushed into the higher education, where we will create best research infrastructure of the world, because research infrastructure is what is lagging. And so we'll create good labs, we'll have best faculties. Under the GAN program, already 700 professors last year came from 58 countries and conducted a course here by staying here for 2 to 3 weeks. It was a wonderful initiative and helped everybody. We have recorded them for Swayam courses also. Swayam, the India's own MOOCs, online courses, and offline also on Swayam Prabha, are absolutely new revolutionary steps, opening doors for forever learning and anytime learning, anywhere learning. So this is also a fantastic thing. The third thing, we are granting nearly rupees 1 lakh rupees per month Prime Minister scholarships for best of the best, yes, for the best of the best students, so that those who have the ability to innovate stay here. Why they go abroad? They don't like food there. They don't like atmosphere there. They're in Boston or anywhere, the weather is much treacherous, but they go there for the sake of wisdom, for the sake of learning and in pursuit of learning. So we want to create all environment here so that they stay here, they innovate here, and that's how Make India happens. Come, innovate, invest, make in India, and sell with pride as made in India. That's the vision of Prime Minister.
Alright, let's go straight to the brain drain concept that we've heard. Also an interesting commitment of $3 billion in 3 years, Karthikeyan.
See, the importance here is that this is something which was conceived by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And Modi, when I spoke to Javadekar, he was continuously saying that the Prime Minister wants to do 2 things. He says the brain drain takes place because we don't have a culture of startup.
Yeah.
Brain drain also takes place because we have archaic laws. Now, when you say what do we have, we have a culture where failure is a stigma. Now, in America, when you go to the Silicon Valley, failure is not a stigma. You fail, you do away with your enterprise, and then you come back with the bang. Now, we don't have laws like that. For example, if you fail, then you file for bankruptcy. Indian bankruptcy laws are archaic in nature. You have so much of trouble closing a company that people, rather than closing the company, they continue to bleed it, and then they stop it, and then it runs in the name, rather than allowing them to think new and create new investments by going to people who are venture capitalists, who invest in ideas rather than bricks and mortar company.
Right.
So for that, what the government is trying to do, what he was trying to explain was that they will be raising 20,000 crores. 2,000 crore will come from the government of India. 18,000 crore would be capped in the market.
Right.
Once that 18,000 rupee comes, it will be used for giving stipends to students. Like, for example, there are a lot of students, who want to do something, but they also want a standard of living. So you will be paid 1 lakh.
Right.
You continue to stay in hostel, which is already subsidized by the government of India. You get a stipend of 1 lakh, and then you do your startup. You stay there, you study, you eat, have a subsidized infrastructure for yourself, but innovate.
Yeah. The stress on innovation is very important here, but Karthikeyan, we do see the dynamics of the startup culture, which perhaps was absent over the last few decades or years, but now is gradually picking up. We do see that happening.
I do, but you see, I in fact asked this question to a lot of people. Startup culture can only come when certain social and law movements need to change. For example, startup culture can only come when you don't make failure a stigma.
Right.
Startup culture can only sustain itself when you have good anti-bankruptcy laws. So for the brain, it's not about we will not let our people go out, There is a movement after industrialization. The capital moves, the labor moves,
Right.
the mind moves. So the people will go, you can't stop them. You can't stop people from having opportunities. You're not an authoritarian regime. You're not North Korea. You're neither the communists of 1960s and 70s. So what they want is to create a certain ecosystem,
Right.
a cultural, legal, social ecosystem where Indians go to California to innovate. They innovate here right on Bangalore or Hyderabad. So that culture, that ecosystem needs to be created.
All right. Now, the minister has also shed light as a part of that exclusive conversation on how there is a need to trust boards of universities in a way to fund and then forget them for a while in order to allow them to function in an autonomous manner. Listen in to what the minister had to say.
The democratic processes within the universities and their idea of research which they have been founded, research and education. Where is that balance? Because some universities, because of sheer pressure of electoral processes and political parties having their unions, their academic routine completely goes haywire. But then that is part of democracy. And then there is an imperative of research and teaching. Where is the balance?
I think we have come of age because there was a decade in 1970s when I was also student leader. There was demonstrations all over and there were disturbance of all the academic calendars. Now that's not the case. Students are studying, teachers are teaching, and I want to improve the research and innovation atmosphere because India lacks in innovation, and unless we innovate we will not be able to attain that sustainable prosperity. We must learn to fund and forget. There will be accountability as far as the CAG audit is concerned and annual reports are concerned, but barring that, if you can't trust your base brains, if you can't trust your base institutes, you can't trust anywhere. And now we are also according graded autonomy, huge autonomy for top 20% of universities who have achieved that top 20% through their quality.
A very interesting point being made by the minister there, Kartikeya. The stress on autonomy of universities cannot be something that can be stressed on enough, because at a time when universities are facing criticism for the way they are functioning, there's also a need to let them be.
See, there are three things here. One, there is a lack of culture of academician going to the government and coming back and teaching. For example, you ask Barack Obama, he's saying he wants to be a law professor.
Right.
Madeleine Albright, she was a teacher. Or Condoleezza Rice, she was a professor. Even Madeleine Albright was a professor. They would be teaching and they would go back to the US administration. One went on to become the Secretary of State, other was the National Security Advisor. So that happens in advanced economies, advanced countries. In India, that sort of to and fro does not happen. On top of it, the issue is, what do you do when the Babus act like demigods? He himself said this. What the government this time is planning to do is to ensure that autonomy is there at a level where boards have the right. For example, if boards have the right to hire professors from abroad or even get students from abroad, you assert your academic power through the world. For example, a lot of people say that Indians go abroad, they study in America, but people have to understand what America does in process. It creates an elite back in India which has a soft center. Russia tried doing it, but they couldn't do that. So imagine if India does that in terms of academics. It asserts itself in countries in Africa. It asserts itself even in the first world countries where you don't have much jobs. You assert yourself in countries in Southeast Asia. So this is the way, some would say that this is like intellectual colonization, but then so what? That's how the world works. Nothing is fair out there.
And in relation to that very aspect, the minister also stresses on the importance to allow students to have their own opinion and to let them also be, and that is what he calls a democracy. Listen to what the minister had to say along those lines.
So how come in recent times our universities, centers of higher education, have become battleground of ideologies rather than research?
No, this is not a correct picture. There are 800 universities and they are doing fine research. Even the so-called battleground JNU has achieved the Visitor Award and national ranking because of their core research in biotechnology, in engineering, in many other fields. So they are doing mainly research. But in newspaper headlines, there are 3-4 universities where all the wrong news appear. Actually, JNU and many all other our institutes are finest institutes, and we want to preserve them to be independent, autonomous, and good institutes, and we want to make them more excellent. So we are just helping. We are not interfering in any university affairs. And I think now JNU, for last so many days you are seeing, there were 2-3 aberrations. One was that world over, one guide, research guide, takes 2 to 3 students for guidance of PhD. We allowed 8 students to be guided by one guide. But in JNU, you can find teachers with 30 students, 40 students, 20 students whom they were guiding. So that was aberration. And so we have corrected it. And now we are also recruiting so many new professors, and particularly scheduled tribe and Divyanga professors. Vacancies remain there for couple of decades. We are correcting that also, filling all the vacancies, and therefore there will be more research students actually doing research in that good framework. So I think there is no ideological background. See, students may have their own inclination. That's a democracy.
Alright, so Karthikeyan, no ideological background in policy certainly, but there are some fine lines that seem to be crossed here and there when it comes to that broad aspect.
Well, see, the reason why I asked him this question was that, after 2014, there was a great debate in universities, national versus anti-national.
Yes.
But the problem with Indian universities is that they don't create good research. We have created a lot of BAs, we have created a lot of MAs, we have created a lot of people with degrees, but without jobs.
Yeah.
So came the issue of vocational training. But then, when I consistently asked him as to why he was, why there was no concerted thought on the fact that universities are debating positions on patriotism rather than debate the issue of lack of research or research facilities. So he agreed. He said that the pure sciences, they are the answer. He spoke of the technology centers. But I said, well, they always look good on paper, but nothing happens, when it comes to things on ground.
Yeah.
So he said that there's a target which the Prime Minister have given, and he would like to fulfill that. But again, I would say, when we talk about technology and issues like that, Molly, it's also about a culture. In America, people leave Harvard and they create Microsoft. They leave their studies and they create Facebook.
Yes.
In India, that culture doesn't exist. That culture has to exist, that the brilliance can exist outside organized knowledge. There can be brilliance despite organized knowledge. Now, it's like code, it's like Confucianism in China, it's that code. India, to me, needs to break that intellectual code.
And also, as you pointed out, the entire debate about national and anti-national elements, of course, has been raging on, specifically not just to do with one university. Of course, JNU has, attracted a lot of that debate as well, which has gone on for months now, but has opened up this new front of what is anti-national, what is national. In fact, the minister also shed light as far as his views on the entire JNU episode is concerned, and also that debate between nationalism and anti-nationalism. The minister spoke about that issue. Take a listen in.
Post 2014, all across the campuses, the debates on national versus anti-national took place. Now the controversy is rested. It's not there anymore. How do you see that in hindsight?
I always think that there is certain period when some types of controversies emerge, but there are always ways to deal with it, and we are happy that all are participating, and I trust that I make dialogue with everybody. So now JNU students also, I said, why you are demonstrating? You can come and talk to me if you have any problem. Let's see it and I'll tell you what it is. So I talk to everybody, all teachers organizations, everybody. So there is no problem.
Alright, so that of course is a very sensitive issue, Kartikeya, which has dominated the public discourse for months ever since it happened on the JNU campus, but of course has become a debate across the country. Many experts have spoken about how this has opened up a new front, which controversy has rested for now, but the minister of course talking a very interesting tone when it comes to that specific JNU incident.
Well, Shishi, the reason why I asked this question on JNU was because, it created a problem for the government, perceptual problem, and that perception problem could not be handled by then Minister Smriti Irani, and she had to be moved out. She went on to become the textiles minister. She has been rehabilitated as information broadcasting minister now. But at that point of time, the whole controversy went out of the vote. You had Rohit Vemula and the Dalit issue. You had Kanhaiya Kumar, and you had the issue of who defines patriotism for someone. But BJP was able to turn it around politically, and Congress, had to face the problem, and the results in UP were pretty evident as to what has gone wrong. But saying that, my intention to ask that question was that good academic session has to have a balance with protest politics.
Right.
Mr. Javadekar himself has been a product of ABVP, and that is why I asked it. And he himself participated in 1970s when academic sessions were completely destroyed because there was movement against Indira Gandhi. So his answer was that if it really doesn't destroy the session or the rhythm of the year, then it is okay to protest. But he says that it is important that protest takes place within the rule. But for me, the biggest takeaway of the interview was, the biggest, he did not choose to attack Mamata Banerjee. Prakash Javadekar did not attack JNU. Prakash Javadekar in fact was extremely conciliatory. So my understanding is perhaps there are certain projects in the government's hand which they want to do it in a collaborative way with the state, because education in India is a concurrent subject. It's shared by the center and the state, and that is the reason why HRD minister has to look collaborative. And Prakash Javadekar as a spokesman can be combative, but HRD minister cannot be. Subjects like health in India, HRD in India, they're part of the concurrent list.
And which is why, of course, he stresses on also the Prime Minister's vision to do away with the regulatory regime in the education sector. The minister spoke at length about that, but here's an excerpt coming your way.
How did you come upon this idea of the Institution of Excellence? How was it conceived?
See, Institution of Idea was actually the Prime Minister's vision for education reform, because he believes that unless you make regular, like why foreign universities and particularly American and European universities are flourishing, because they are on their board decide everything. Governments gives grants, government gives grants for projects also, but they don't interfere at all, and therefore we also want to bring that culture. And this is actually an exercise in ministry, that we are teaching our officers not to be demigods for intellectual institutes like IIMs and others. Here we want to have that eminence, Institute of Eminence, who will excel in their quality through complete autonomy and will achieve international ranking within 10 years.
That might be the vision of the government, but is it implementable to do away with the regulatory regime in the education sector, Kartikeya?
Well, I think it's possible, because the government will have to go for systemic reform. Like for example, UGC or institutions of higher excellence. The government intends to spend thousands of crores so that Indian institutions can be part of top 50 world ranking institutions. Indian institutions are not part of, they don't even make it to top 60.
Right.
You leave alone top 100. So issue is that, and secondly, there is another issue which primarily connects India and the world, is that pure science research, they are all abroad.
Right.
India can have a lot of technology machines, but pure science research has not taken a great leap. And that's the focus of the government of India, because he himself said that technology can solve problems to an extent, but you need research in pure sciences, and we don't have that. And second comes the problem is the infrastructure. When you talk about labs, we don't talk about a building and a hall. We should talk about equipments. We are talking about diagnostic equipments. We are talking about exploratory equipments. We are talking about equipments which allows data, chemical, biological analysis. It's like genetic engineering. For them, you require infrastructure. You need to amend your laws, because certain laws have to deal with ethical questions.
Right.
They concern animals. You know, even small law on prevention of cruelty against animals also need to be, it will become part and parcel if you bring certain technologies in. So it is a complex process. Now, if I say that the government plans to do in 6 months, I don't believe it. But the government still has 2 years in its hand, and it can at least, if not significant, but bring in substantial reforms.
All right. Now that's just a sample of what the minister has said. We are of course going to get you that entire interview at 8:30 p.m. in just about 2 hours from now. Do stay tuned for that. Let's leave it there for the moment. Karthikeya, thanks very much for joining us.